Hi, everyone. It's our Divorcing and Tax Summit. Hi, everyone. It's our Divorcing and Tax Summit. And we're continuing on with today's theme, which is filing for divorce before, during, and after. And I'm over the moon excited to have Debra Clement with me today. So welcome, Debra. How are you today?
I'm thrilled to be here. It's not often I get to bring in, both of my professions at the same time, so I'm very excited.
Well, let me put my glasses on and tell everybody what we're talking about and a little bit about you. So today, right now at noon, we're talking about 3 legal and spiritual tools you need to know when divorcing. So Debra Clement, JD, is an astrologer, attorney, author, radio host, and certified Heal Your Life teacher. She is a former litigant in a high conflict custody action that spanned 7 years, 3 courts, and 6 figures. Ooh, Jesus. While this painful experience motivated her to become a legal advocate, it was the practical application of her first profession, astrology, that helped her cope with it. At 41, she graduated with top honors in family law, juvenile justice, and advocacy and litigation from Hofstra. Say that, Debra. My mouth isn't working.
Hofstra University School of Law.
Law school, and she served as the program coordinator for its divorce educational program, which acronym is PEACE, and as a managing editor of the Family Court Review. She is also the author of 2 legal articles. And during her personal journey to heal her psyche, Debra discovered life-changing spiritual practices, reclaimed her passion, and embraced her soul's purpose. Today, she is fulfilling that purpose as a consulting astrologer and spiritual guide who empowers others to become the master of their faith rather than the victim of it. So thank you so much, Debra, for being here. And I am so excited too, because you know how nutty crunchy I am, and that you're such a unique offering for people going through divorce, because you have such a strong knowledge of the legal field, but you're also bringing in that emotional, spiritual component. So thank you so much. And I'm so excited to hear those 3 legal tips first, and then we'll get into our favorite part, the spiritual and emotional component.
Okay, my first tip or the first tool, it sounds obvious, but you have to have a legal advocate that is right for your particular situation. A lot of attorneys handle divorce, but if you have a high conflict divorce, or if there's allegations of abuse, or if there's a custody issue, they may not be that well versed in it, and you don't want an attorney who's kind of learning on your case. Also, sometimes along the way, things change. Happened to me. And if that happens, if you're going along, it starts to, things come in. Let's say it goes from, a normal divorce where you thought everything was sort of agreed upon, suddenly it's high conflict. You need to get a second opinion. You do it with your health, you do it with attorneys. And I will say also, for anyone who is contemplating divorce, you find the best attorney out there, pay the consultation fee, okay? And you go there armed with questions, and I'll say it, you pick their brains, ask him or her all of your questions, get your information. You may not be able to afford that particular attorney, but when you go to, you're going to go in, I can't think of the word, you're going to meet with other attorneys and interview them, because really you're hiring them, you have a strong basis to say who knows their stuff. So having the right advocate for your particular situation is a must.
It is. And when you're in that emotional part of this, when you all of a sudden have that spark that pushes you to file, you're kind of in that blinder situation, so that you need that clarity of that tip, that use patience, use your time, interview people, make sure that this is a match, because you're right. You don't know if this is going to be a vanilla flavored divorce that everybody's agreeing to all of a sudden you're blindsided and it becomes a high conflict. And when we say high conflict, Debra, what does that really mean? Because if you're sitting at home listening to this and really don't know what you should look out for, if you might be in this position of a quote unquote high conflict. So what is a high conflict divorce?
A high conflict divorce Obviously, anything to do with domestic violence, anything to do with allegations of child abuse, right at the top, high conflict. But even between the parties, if there's such animosity, if there's no communication between the parties, one of them, your spouse refuses to speak, they move out. You don't know where they're living. I mean, things like this actually happen. They're not paying support. And they're really not paying support after, the attorney reaches out a few times, or maybe you can, file, but you're going to court numerous times for the same thing. They're not showing up, or they're not returning if you have kids at the same time. It becomes a repeated pattern. It's not a one-time thing. You're on your way to high conflict.
Okay. So your first tip was to advocate for yourself, and that is to find your team. You're building a team for avocation of you and your children. So the first tip is to be mindful, take your time, interview people. No different, because you have to think of it, they're working for you and your resources. So interview them. That's so that's number one. What's two?
The only thing I just want to add, again, if you're already in the process, do not feel bad if you think, I need to let this attorney go and hire someone with better credentials. This is your life. This is your children's life. You don't feel bad about things. It is business. Just find something new and you move on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Second tip, you hope you don't need this. But nowadays, a lot of communication is done through email, right? And it's very easy to say, oh, I didn't get it. It got lost in cyberspace. It went into my spam file. So I do recommend that people subscribe to a secure email service, one that has certified proof of delivery.
Okay.
They'll show you when it opens. Now, there are many services like this. Can I mention one? I don't.
Sure, I'd appreciate that, because
okay, what
there, you're saying you're addressing one of the components of a high conflict personality, is that they'll say, oh, I never got that, or I didn't see that. But now with this, you're going to have it's like return receipt requested by email.
Exactly. And the best part is that it's up to you. When you send it, you can either let the person see that it says certified, or you send it and not it. One of the services is called RMail, R-M-A-I-L. I believe they even have a free trial where you can send 5 free a month. So it's rmail.com. I get nothing for promoting it, but it is a very good service, and they can check out others as well. And I want to say, it's not only helpful if the spouse, is saying, I don't get it, I never got the email, but even for your attorney, I'm an attorney. But the biggest complaint about attorneys is what? They don't respond. They don't return phone calls. They don't return emails. And I give advice to everyone out there. If your attorney doesn't get back to you once, look, things happen. You call again, you email again.
Right.
Twice, no one's getting back to you. You send them a certified email, I guarantee you're getting a phone call, you're getting a response. As soon as you start that trail,
yes,
they're going to respond to you. And sometimes, unfortunately, that's what you need to do.
Well, that's an amazing tip right there. That's Debra, that's the first time I've ever heard of this creature. So thank you so much. Tweet. That's a tweet right there. Okay, so go ahead, and now we're moving on. So we're advocating, and we're communicating in a way that you have a trackable field of the communication to your lawyer and to other parties involved. Okay.
Exactly. And the last one is it's a journal. Now, you can do this online in a Word doc, though I would recommend your password protected. You can in a notebook. I mean, years ago, that's how I did it. But I do recommend it online for one reason is, first of all, you need to really record everything that's relevant to your action. And this is particularly important if you are in a high conflict divorce, a contested divorce, a divorce where there are issues going on back and forth. And so you need to have all the facts. You want to write it down as quickly as you can while it is fresh in your mind, the dates, the times. Why it is helpful, besides the fact that you need accurate facts, you need to convey them to your attorney.
Right.
It's a lot easier to copy and paste into your secure email, that you can send to your attorney, rather than getting on the phone and discussing it, which ka-ching, right? It takes, you want to keep your bill down as well. And even if it's not major, let's say you have questions you want to ask your attorney or issues that come up, I would say write them down, because before you get on the phone, if you have to have a conference with your attorney,
Yes.
go through that list, bullet points, turn them into bullet points. Whether you send them in the email, it's easier for your attorney to read them instead of reading through like, a novel. Nothing personal. I've done it. I know. So
Right.
It's succinct. And again, if you're on the phone, you want to keep it, you want to be effective, but they're not your therapist, they're not your friend, they're not your accountant, they're not your financial planner. You need all of those things. They're not your coach. You need one of those sometimes.
Right.
But I would say the log is essential, especially in high conflict.
And we're going to talk about the spiritual and emotional component, but the log is so important. There's two different things going on. You're logging incidents and what has happened in important documentation of communication, but there's also a journal, a journal for your emotional component to get that out and to cleanse yourself. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And I know personally for me, I'm 4 years into my divorce, and I still keep track. And just very quickly, even in an Excel spreadsheet, just document, the time, what happened, anything that I feel would be important to, I hate to say defend my position, but that's basically what you're doing. You're creating a log and a journal of circumstances around, especially high conflict child custody. So that's perfect.
I hate to say it's a necessary evil, but it is. And as far as defending your position, sometimes you're being attacked. That's what you have to do. And you have to have those facts, because the other side is going to look for any type of, anything that's off. That's why I say you try to do it when it's fresh in your mind. Even if you're writing it on a Post-it, and then when you go home, you type it into a log.
Yes. Yes, that is so important. And so what I love about what you do, your hats that you wear, that you juggle, so here you have this very logical part of you who's this brilliant attorney, and then you overlay this with the spiritual part, with this is the, astrology. And I know for me and for, I've been coaching people going through life transitions now for, I hate to say it, almost 2 decades. And it's when you get stuck in the victimization of your experience, and I'm still a student, and you feel as though your feelings become who you are, then the cycle is so hard to move through and let that swirl around. And what I love about what you have done for me personally, and what I have witnessed what you've done for other women, is through astrology. It's really about, this life, the story that you're writing, has some protection, has some divinity in it that is, some things are fated and some things are destined. And even within those experience of your fabric, of your story, of this life, you still have free choice. And so that's what I love about what you do. So why don't we shift now to the 3 spiritual components that you need before, during, and after divorce?
Great, absolutely. And I'd just like to say, I would say I was an astrologer first.
I know, I love that. I love it.
And I will say this, it's not really a joke, but I used to initially, when I first was in my one of 7 years of this ordeal, because it was, I used to joke and say, God, I'm spending so much money. I either have to marry an attorney or become an attorney. And so I decided I would, ultimately become one. But astrology, absolutely, for me, if we're talking about spiritual tools, everyone needs to find their spiritual anchor. Astrology, absolutely was mine. And yes, I do believe there are certain connections, particularly relationships, and usually it's the difficult ones, quite frankly, it's the challenging ones. I believe they are fated because they're part of a lesson. The free will, that's where we see, do we get it right? Do we get it wrong, or not so right, or less right, is the way I like to put it. But it really does come down to free will. In terms of the astrology, though, and I always say this, I didn't always believe that God, planets could really have an influence, on your life. But things do work in cycles. We see history repeat itself. Well, the cycles repeat themselves as well. And so for me, I always say it helped me keep my sanity, because those first 2 years for me were terrifying, to be quite honest. I was never so frightened in my life. And, I used to think people could think I was crazy. I didn't care. I would look at the cycles. It made sense to me. I understood then why it was happening to some degree, and because I wasn't quite as versed as I am now. And I also was able to understand, and this for me was wonderful, when is this cycle ending? When is the pressure going to ease? And for me, it also gave me guidance of, there were times when I felt, okay, I can't push now, cannot push. And then other times when it was, it was charge ahead.
Well, you know what? You hit on so many important things to talk about right in that little sentence, is when was this going to end? That's my experience personally, but also listening to all these amazing women who I have the privilege of coaching now, is when is this going to end? And that sentiment of when is this going to end is sometimes overrides the logical way of dealing with this situation. So by calling in the tools that resonate with you in astronomy, you helped me, because it was, okay, right now is probably, you need to rethink what you're doing. And you know what, Debra, as you know, this week, Thursday is a new moon.
I know.
We're coming, this summit is running during the new moon. And what you taught me during that is, look at that new moon, and what is your intention? And is your intention now in line with where you want to go? And maybe you could talk about that, because you just mentioned, how you looked at your chart and realized, okay, now it's time to be still instead of trying to push the river, and we're going to flow with it. And, and then you looked at your chart and said, okay, now we're getting in the motorboat. We're going to go down, So we talk a little bit about that.
Well, I do want to just, if you don't mind, I want to just go back to one thing, because you're talking about, when is it going to be over? Yes. And certainly for me, with a court process, that really helped in certain events, took off the pressure. But the reality of the matter is that in some cases, it's not over till they're dead.
I love when you say that.
I mean, it's
the truth. And when you say that,
what it is, you hope it's not so. And eventually, sometimes things do, work that out. But certain personalities, you're dealing with it your entire life. Yes.
So that's why we're going to talk about those 3 spiritual tips, because knowing that is empowering in a way. So what is our first one? So find what works for you. Find what resonates with you.
Absolutely. And as I said, for me, it was astrology. But for someone else, it might be, something else. It might be reading. It might be reading inspirational material every morning and every evening, whatever it is. But you need to find your anchor, and it may be a person. It may be, again, a divorce coach, because there's going to be storms, and some of them are quite turbulent. And but I really do believe you need something to hold on to keep you going forward emotionally, especially if you have children, because we've got to be strong for them.
Right. Okay. So find that. And, one of them could maybe be mantras and journaling, but it's really, for me, I remember like being Cinderella, trying on all these different things to see what would work, and then feeling overwhelmed. So, part of the tip I would say was really just find that one thing that's going to work for you and carry you through this whole time. And
it just takes one.
It just takes one. Okay, go ahead, Debra. What's the next one?
Well, the second one actually had to do with journaling, but for me, it was more about a journal for perspective. And so what I recommend, and this can be done on a computer, or if you want to write a notebook, to me, this one doesn't matter either way. But what it's about really is anything that is confusing you, upsetting you, anything you need clarity on, I strongly recommend you take some paper or get on write it all out. Stream of consciousness, everything, get it all out. Then leave it alone, unless it's something, pressing, like you have to do it the next morning, but leave it alone for a couple of days. Because what happens is when we're in that state, right, it's the emotions, we cannot see clearly. Every client, and this is something I learned as a divorce attorney, every person who's going through a divorce is in crisis. Different degrees. For some, it's very mild. For some, it's they really need to put you into therapy.
Right.
So we don't see clearly. But, I always say, if you go back to it for a few days later, all of a sudden it's like you're reading someone else's story. And let's be honest, when we're reading those, date myself here, Dear Ann Landers in paper, we know the answers to everybody else's problems. We see it so clearly, right? Oh, God, I can't believe somebody's really asking this question. And so it's a way, and actually how this tip came, it actually came through astrology, because it's something I recommend to my clients who have a very strong Neptune influence, which tends to, make things vague, and they don't see things clearly, especially in relationships.
Right.
And that's the advice I give them. Write it down, write down the promises, see if, they're backed up with action. But in terms of going through a divorce, anything, write it down. And also, when you look back, you might say to yourself, maybe I overreacted to that.
Right.
So it's about perspective.
Or maybe you say to yourself, I am badass. I'm handling things so well.
Yes, and then, exactly.
Yeah. Give yourself a little kudos for handling it. And you're right, the perspective of, but you know what I always recommend for my clients, and you and I share this, is physically journaling, putting a pen in your hand and writing it down. You're triggering both sides of your brain. So let's face it, we're in fight or flight. Your chemical soup in your brain is doing exactly what it should be doing, which is triggering alert, 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 alert. And you know what? If you're in a high conflict divorce, you always have to be hyper vigilant, or you're feeling like you have to. But by writing, you connect both hemispheres of your brain through your amygdala, and then that calms things down. So that is such an appropriate and amazing tip, because that gives you mental oxygen to go back and read it and then be able to come from a different perspective. And it is very calming, and it's a practice, because I know for me at the beginning, the email would come in and I would, write back. And now I'm like, oh, okay, yep, there it is. And even have that physical reaction to it, because it was so argumentative. So that is such an important tip, perspective. Take your time. Create mental oxygen. Reread it.
Mental oxygen. I'm going to remember that.
I always say mental oxygen. That's what you need, mental oxygen. It just gives you a moment for clarity. So that's perfect. And then number 3.
Number 3, a 3-subject notebook. Literally the notebook I could pick up for your kids, 3 subjects. And, I like to call it a transformation notebook, but really it's 3 subjects: liberation, appreciation, manifestation. So
by liberation, you don't mean liquor.
No, though sometimes you feel like you're being driven.
That's not your liquor log, is it, Debra?
No, but I will tell you, the thing about liberation, and I'm going to say, to me, it's about really freedom and releasing, is that, there's a reason trees and certain plants are pruned. You get rid of the dead wood, so then the spring comes and it blossoms anew, and it blossoms beautifully.
Right.
And to the same degree, because here's the thing, sometimes you want the divorce, maybe you don't want the divorce. So I always say, by design or default, you're starting over.
Right.
And there is going to be a new life, and there is going to be a new beginning. And so you have to really cut out the negative energy that you're clinging to. We don't always like to admit that we are, but we are. And so what I recommend is that in the first section there of liberation, to release the energy, it's really about forgiveness. Now, I have to be honest, a lot of people are not ready to forgive. It took me years. It took me just years to understand that forgiveness and condoning what you did to me are not the same thing. But I was stuck for years. So what I recommend is, if you can't say, so-and-so, and you write it down, you want to write it and you want to speak it repeatedly, and you do it daily. And you'd be surprised, and this will work with any type of relationship or, any type of negative emotion. But let's say, for example, you'd say so-and-so, and you'd like to say, I forgive you for blank, 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 and I now release you, and I set us both free. You may not be ready for that. So what I find is a really good start is to start releasing the attachment to the energy. And you can just write, I'm willing to release my attachment to the anger I feel to to so and so. I release it and I set us free, or I release it, I set myself free. But you're really setting both of you free. And it's about releasing, because you want to actually release the attachment to anything that upsets you, to the emotions, because that's really what it's about.
Yes. So you want to cut the cords, and if you can imagine, you have energetic cords that are invisible between you and your family and your life and your partner, and especially being in such an intimate relationship with someone, there's cords continuously, and it's almost as if you're screaming. I love what you say, because it's almost like you're screaming to the universe, enough is enough.
Yeah,
we're done here. Our contract is complete.
Yeah.
You go your way, I go my way. And by doing that, that's what I used to say, my liberating statement, because I too wasn't able to say, I forgive you for blah, 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 and it took a process. Of course, now I've come to that point, and it is a process for everyone. But if you use a mantra like you just said, or have a script, and what is so important is that we're not taught these things, Debra. We're not taught the simple thing that you just said. And if you could say it again, and I'll say mine, because that is just so powerful to write that down.
And I just want to say, for any affirmation, because you hear how you write, I am powerful, I am strong, I am abundant. And sometimes you're just not feeling it. And a lot of people really they cannot do it. But if you start, and I learned this through the Heal Your Life program, through Louise Hay, because I want to give credit, where I learned it is you start with I'm willing to, because it's a great first step. And the more you do that, eventually you will be able to say, but you've got to commit to it. That's the one thing you've got to stress. You've got to commit. It's a practice.
It is a practice. And sometimes you feel like you're a liar, liar, pants are fire, because what you're writing and what you're saying feels incongruent to how you're feeling.
Right.
But just the way you say, I am willing. I'm willing.
Yeah. And like I say, you can just start with I'm willing to release the anger, and write their name first. So I'm willing to release the anger I feel towards you for whatever, I release it and I set us free. Write it 10 times, read it out loud. Now, obviously, if your kids are around, you're not going to do it, but when you're in the car,
right.
The written word has power, but the spoken word, vibration, really, the stronger, the louder, it will become easier every day that you do it. But I do want to stress, it does take time. But what I say to my clients, even baby steps will eventually get you across the finish line.
Right, right. And you know what? Find that spot. Maybe it's driving to work when you're all by yourself after you drop the kids off. Or maybe it's in the shower. Or maybe when you go to the bathroom, you lock the door and you say it out loud. And that's what I used to do. I used to put it on a little sticky note and put it on my mirror. And it is actually okay for your children to see you doing that, because you're teaching them that language that they'll need further in their life. So it's okay for them to hear you or see you, or make it a part of the ritual or routine. So I love that. So that's our third one, which is a 3-subject notebook. The first part is liberation.
Second one is appreciation. On a daily basis, write down something that you appreciate. Now, if something happened that day, that's wonderful. By all means, write that down. But if you have a day when you're just not really feeling it, you can think back to something that happened years ago that you really appreciated, that really made you feel good, because you want to capture that feeling, and you also want to invite more good into your life. And you have to have gratitude. You have to show appreciation. And as I say, in terms of, not feeling it, I recall one night, this was years ago, and I was laying in bed, and I thought, I have to start appreciating. Let me start. So I was thinking, thank God, my mother, my daughter, things like that. And I was really kind of stuck. And so I started literally with the house. And I'm not kidding. When I got to the point, I was just saying, I was thankful for the spoons. I was thankful for the forks. And it may sound really silly, but the more you are saying that you are thankful or that you appreciate, you do start to feel it. And so
it changes the energy, that gratitude listing, appreciation listing. And you know what, Debra, that's so amazing that you bring up the spoon and the dishes and the common things, because it's those common things that create our foundation. And you know what? And if another little tip would be, look at your body. I'm grateful for my hands and my fingers and my nose and my mouth and my ears and my feet. I used to say, when I had nothing, I got nothing. I would say, look at these feet, man. They held me up all day. And look at these hands, everything I did to support everybody else. And there's always something.
No, there is always something. And, so it starts with where we are. And also I do feel that if you do this in order, and if you do have the time, I feel first you are releasing something. You are letting something go. Now you are appreciating, you're bringing in this energy. And then the third section is manifestation. Now, most commonly people think of law of attraction and it's, I'm driving the beautiful car. And that's great. There's something you want, vacation, whatever. Absolutely go for it. It is I am. It is in the present. If you can't do it, I'm willing. I'm willing to be open to love.
Right.
Really, for me, when you're going through the divorce, especially because it's such an emotional time, sometimes, it's like, I remember thinking, someone had talked to me about dating. I remember thinking like, I just want to get through today.
Right.
I just want to get through today. And so a lot of times in the evening, what, you can write down is something like, I wake up in the morning refreshed after a good night's sleep. Your children, I'm so happy my children are getting along. Simple things. Focus on your day-to-day living, the traffic, whatever. Affirm for those things because quite frankly, at least I found, you mentioned the fight or flight. So you're so hyper vigilant and you're ready for all, I was going to say all the fast pitches. You're ready for that.
Incoming.
You're ready for all the incoming. And then these little things like the traffic or the kids arguing or you don't, sleep that well, they set you off. That for me, which I should say I could handle the big emergencies, but it was the day-to-day that drove me crazy. So in terms of the manifestation, absolutely bring in whatever you want. But I will say, think about the daily things. I have plenty of time to get everything done. That's an important one.
Mine and my children we say all the time, I move through today with grace and ease.
Yeah.
And that brings you right to this present moment because when you're in that fight or flight, it's so much coming at you. You just want to ground yourself right here in that present moment. And so that tip is so perfect, what you just said. So
one of my favorites I just want to share is I always know exactly what to say.
Oh, I love that one. I'm writing that down. We're going to tweet that one. So Debra, you were so generous and we have some goodies and I just want to tell everyone they can find you. First of all, thank you so much for those
My pleasure. My
because
pleasure.
you know what I love so much about you and we share this, that this has to be a holistic learning. If you look at this as a holistic, this is about the whole of you. Your spiritual, your emotional, and your body, and your manifestation, and everything. It's about the holistic way of navigating this time. So I love and so appreciate everything that you said, and of course, right under the link, people are watching us right now, and right under the link is your contact information. But you do have a goodie. Right? I believe.
I do have a goodie that they can that I finally got to you. Better late than never, right?
That's all right.
Yes, and it's called it's a download. It's a PDF. It's called Solar Flare: How and Where Your Sun is Supposed to Shine. Each one of us has a purpose. Each one of us is here to shine. And, there's an entire planetary team, certainly to help you. But the sun, everyone pretty much knows their sun sign. So I thought we'd start with the sun sign. And it's just a little bit of a glimpse, into, like I say, who you are, who you shine, because there is, divorce, and you said this before, and I was so happy to hear you say this because it's true. Divorce is an experience. It's going to eventually, the divorce ends. But divorce is an experience, and it's not something that you have to refuse to be defined by it. You don't make a career out of it.
Oh, someone's trying to talk to us, but I'll get back to them. You know what? I love that you're starting with the sun, because a friend of mine, when I was going through my divorce, and she had gone through a very high conflict divorce too, the line we use to each other is sparkle up. Sparkle up. And that's the blog. That's my name of my blog, because that's the line that we said to each other. And your sun always shines. Sometimes, it's behind the clouds, but
it always shines. And the last tip, it's not just one tip I would really like to share with everyone, because it was life-changing for me once I finally got this, is, we all know what we want. We don't always know what we need, excuse me. And I always say, wants can be compromised, but your needs have to be met. And so I think one of the important things that anyone can do, and even when perhaps when they're journaling, is really think about looking at your relationship even, because, this one is ending. But for the next one, if you're going to be open to love again, what was it? What need was not being met? Because that really, the bottom line, our needs have to be met. And with no disrespect to Dr. Gray, I always say Venus and Mars get you into the bedroom.
Right.
But the moon decides if you can live day to day, and Mercury decides, if you could communicate. And it's about your needs. At the end of the day, it's the moon, it's your needs. So consider for everyone what you want, and then what do you really need? Because that's where we settle, and that's where we go wrong.
And you know what? Going forward, because you're creating anew, you need to know what you need. So that's a beautiful place to end. So thank you so much, Debra. Oh, I look forward to our time together, and I'm going to rewatch and watch and write down all those affirmations and tips. So feel free to connect with Debra under the link under what you're watching. And also, if you need, you can direct message me, and we can facilitate your getting in touch. And if you have any further questions, we'll be on Facebook posting some questions afterwards. But thank you so much, Debra. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, honey.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.